Okay, so I think I have a few minutes. Let me just confirm if we have gone live. Are we there? So, yeah. So I think we have another 5 minutes to start. Just wait for everybody else to also get online. I think I've managed to do this. I think I've managed it right. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, sir. That's great. With all the technology bit, I think we're all figuring out ways of sort of going about this. So I guess another 5 minutes and we'll be back. Another, I think, 3-4 minutes. A lot of people are writing messages to me, so I'm just going to try and get them to the page because I think something is unclear with respect to, let me just say that there on the page. I think it should be visible now. I'm online. Okay, so we're going to start in 3-4 minutes, but what I plan to do today is probably look at Supreme Court practice, and I'm going to look at it from a lens of practice and procedure to the extent of giving you an introductory overview. Okay, and I also aim to probably take you to the practice. So yes, I'm just waiting for the others to log in and then we can begin. Okay, because I'm not going to be teaching off a book or anything, so I hope that this is more practical and in the sense of procedure. Okay, so we're not following a book structure. I'm telling you exactly a practitioner's viewpoint as you'll have to deal with when there's a brief. Okay, so I'm just waiting. A lot of people are messaging. 1 second. Great. Okay, 2 minutes more. No, I just need the rules. Yeah, that should suffice. Okay, right. So yeah, practice procedure. Okay, until the others are pouring in, I think I can just tell you a little about myself and probably redo that bit once everybody walks in, because I think I see a lot of my students. That's great. That's wonderful. Okay, Amit is online. Great, wonderful. So Yes, I have actually had the fortune of teaching this subject for over a year now. And I've been teaching this subject at NLU Delhi and Lloyd Law College and NLU Odisha. So these are the three places where I've touched upon this subject. And yes, thank you, Tarveen sir. I see the message pop up. Thank you so much. So I'm just talking to them until it strikes 6 and then I can start. So yes, I've had the fortune of teaching this subject in over 2 law colleges now, and it's rather been received very well because I believe that this was one subject that was untouched, okay? And even as a young lawyer, I think this was one subject that I picked up when I actually started going to the Supreme Court. So I started right from the bottom. So I did trial, and then I moved up until there till I actually understood how the machinery works. And I think so it's very crucial to understand and dive into this practice from a generic overview and then go specific, okay? So what I'm going to do today is actually give that generic overview to all of you. So you don't need a book. If you just listen carefully for literally 30 minutes, that's all the exercise is. You'd pretty much understand that when a Supreme Court brief comes, what do you have to file out of it, okay? Which is actually the crucial bit, which is what is important, okay? Because nobody will tell you that as a lawyer. You're going to find it very difficult to ask someone कि मुझे फाइल क्या करना है इस brief में से. So that's why this becomes very crucial, because nobody walked us through, and we literally found our ways by, pawning off drafts, looking at different documents. So that is why this subject becomes very important, because as much as we cannot teach procedure, I think we ought to teach procedure as a practitioner, because that's the most crucial bit, okay? So what I'm going to do today is an overview of Supreme Court practice and procedure. It's okay if you haven't had any clue about this. There's no prior subject knowledge involved. I'm guessing and I'm hoping that I'm going to start from the very basics to introduce you to this new world of how the Supreme Court practice works, okay? So for anybody who's studied this subject from me, I see a couple of my students out there, this is a sort of a revision capsule for us to look at how the jurisdictions play out. What kind of different jurisdictions does the Supreme Court of India offer, okay? So as a lawyer, this is something we are not conventionally taught, okay? We don't even have books or material conventionally on this. We have one book by Professor Venkat Ramani, which is an excellent book on practice and procedure, okay, which is fantastic to read. But that's a little detailed, okay? So that's a great book to have in a library. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and summarize Professor Venkat Ramani's book for you, so that gets easier for you. So this is like an intro to that book, okay? Or this is like an intro capsule to your practice world. So it's a sharp 6 and we'll be punctual, and I'm going to start. And I think what's important to understand is, one second guys. What's important to understand is that whenever you look at Supreme Court practice and procedure, we're looking at procedural law. So we're looking at something which is supporting the substantive law, because we know that there are 3 kinds of laws, right? Theoretically. So essentially, what does procedure do? Procedure helps the substantive law succeed. And that's what's important to understand, that you have a procedure in place which gives you the rules, regulations, and guidelines to help you buttress the substance, which is actually the substantive law. And that's why it's crucial to understand that procedure will be a handmaiden for the justice to be delivered out of the substantive law. Okay, so that's very important to keep in mind, that procedure will always come underneath substantive law. It's not the first key that I address. Now, the first important bit is that before starting, I just want to tell all of you that we have a couple of people now who've joined us. And I just want to tell you that I currently am a practicing lawyer, and I also teach in over 2 law colleges, National Law School Delhi and Lloyd Law College. And I'm today talking to you people about Supreme Court practice and procedure. And I'm going to outline for you the different types of jurisdictions, so that when a brief comes, you exactly know ki kya file karna hai. Is it an SLP? Is it a writ? Is it probably a review? Am I supposed to file an original suit? How do I decide all these things? Okay, so I'll go crazy if I have to look at 700, 800, 1000 pages. So perhaps the best way to solve that issue is to listen for 30 minutes. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to do. I did my law. I'm relatively a young lawyer in comparison to a lot of you who've been very kind to join me. But I did my law from GNLU, and thereafter I went to the University of Oxford. I was briefly working with Amarchand Mangaldas in the dispute resolution team. Thereafter, I went to the University of Oxford, and thereafter I was at The Hague working at the International Criminal Tribunal. And once that got done, I was back here and I started teaching international criminal law, which I majored in. And I used to teach that at NLU Delhi and Lloyd Law College. I qualified my AOR exam this year. So I'm just trying to give back in whatever little way I can of my little theoretical and practical knowledge, so that it makes it a lot simpler for all of you. Okay, so I'm very glad that I'm getting this opportunity to also interact with so many lawyers across the board, and of course my students who've also been very kind to join in. Okay. So I've just been telling everybody that we're looking at procedure, which is something which is ignored in theory. Okay, so it's the most important thing to be studied, because it's like the IPC and the CRPC. IPC reading is very easy, but to understand how the IPC actually plays out in practice, you need to know the CRPC, because you need to know how to strategize, which case to file when, which is why it's very, very crucial. Okay, so it's very important to know procedure if you want to understand and succeed substantively, not only the litigation side, but even to predict on the contract side, on the commercial side, economic crimes. Okay, any of this becomes very crucial and important. So when you look at Supreme Court practice, we have something called the Supreme Court Rules of Practice and Procedure. Okay, Supreme Court Rules of 2013, which is actually what governs Supreme Court practice. So it's not like the other courts in the country. Other courts everywhere, we have our own listing rules, our own filing rules. But in this particular place, we have what we call the Supreme Court Rules of Practice and Procedure 2013. Now there is an excellent handbook, okay, which is available online free of cost, which has been actually given to the registry of the Supreme Court to follow. So there is, if you Google, it's a 2017 edition, everyone. It's a very useful document to start from. So if anybody wants to understand Supreme Court practice and procedure, I would say the first best thing to pick up is the Supreme Court rules, the registry handbook on the Supreme Court rules of practice and procedure. It's into 8 parts, okay? Excellent book. It's got these schedules in there, and it tells you literally line by line, topic by topic, what the procedural bits are. Okay, so it's a very useful document. I would say everybody should get their hands on what we call the registry handbook. So it's actually a direction which is given to the registry of the Supreme Court, but it's super useful for every lawyer. So you have an AOR on board, you want to check what are the compliances, has the AOR done everything, has the filing been done correctly, have all the steps been followed. All you need to do is get your hands on the handbook. It's a 2017 edition, freely available. It's also available on the Supreme Court website, okay, sci.gov.in. I'll also put up the link to the handbook once the seminar is over or the session is over, okay. So that's a great exercise. Get your hands on that handbook, okay. That handbook is also a very, very excellent tool for a Control F. So suppose you want to file a review. So you just do a Control F for a review. It's going to give you everything about how to file a review, what is the limitation period, what all compliances need to be followed, what all documents are required. You need an AOR to certify your review, etc., etc. Okay, it has to go before the same bench. You have a lot of compliances which the handbook will easily tell you. Okay, something which is actually just the Supreme Court rules written out in a topic wise format. So it's an excellent booklet to have. Okay. Also, please understand, before we dive into the topic-wise discussion of practice and procedure, and I'll try to cover as much as I can quickly in this 40 minutes window, but we must understand the distinction between an advocate on record, and a senior advocate, okay? So anybody who's enrolled on the state bar, okay, as per the Advocates Act, that person is an advocate. That's how simple is it, okay? But if you have the Supreme Court rules governing you, wherein you are allowed to plead in the Supreme Court actively, that's when you're called an AOR, okay? So the moment you become an AOR, your governance does not come from that bar council, that state bar council which has enrolled you, your name, but actually your governance will shift to SCR. Okay, so I'm going to call Supreme Court Rules of 2013, and I'm talking about the amended version of 2013. So every time I talk about Supreme Court rules, I'm talking about the amended version, not the 1966 version. Okay, so remember that. So in the 2013 amended rules, what's essential to understand is that it is a very, very clear distinction between an AOR, an advocate, and a senior advocate. And a senior advocate, of course, will also tell you, so there are orders and rules, and it will tell you that this person who has assumed the gown due to seniority cannot solicit briefs. He or she cannot in his own name file a wakalatnama. Okay, you need a junior counsel to do that, at least in theory. Okay, what happens in the court corridors practically is a separate issue, and I'm not going to dwell into that discussion. But technically, a senior advocate cannot solicit a brief even. वो अपने पास एक brief बुला भी नहीं सकते हैं. Okay, so that's what's important. Now what happens actually is for a separate discussion for all of us. Okay, so now we get down to understanding that what are we going to study today. We're going to study the different types of jurisdictions available, okay, as per the Supreme Court rules of 2013, and then I'm going to very interestingly tell you what bench will hear what matter. Okay, so minimum number of judges, bench strength. I'm going to talk about when you have 2 judges, 3 judges, 5 judges, 7 judges, okay? And is it going to be the same bench? Is it going to be a different bench? So this becomes very important to even challenge, okay? So you can be somebody who's doing a lot of trial, and I think that's excellent. You can be somebody with a great high court practice, but what is good to know is that these things exist, and that's something important to know. I started out as a trial court lawyer myself. I did 2 years of extensive just trial court work. That's what, as a second generation lawyer, I was taught. So what actually happens is that when you move up the ladder, it makes your basics really strong. So now when I explain the jurisdictions of the Supreme Court to you, it's going to make a lot of sense when I... One second, I think it did interrupt me, and I'm hoping, am I visible to all of you? I'm guessing. Yeah. Okay. So I think it's resumed now. So what's important to understand is that we not only have these schedules telling us about the overview of the jurisdiction, but it's also going to outline what specifics of the jurisdiction they are, okay? So I'm going to start with the first one that's for us, and that's important to know. And before the jurisdiction bit, I'm going to tell you 4 articles of the Constitution which you need to use in a Supreme Court practice. Just pretty much these 4 articles and you'd be okay, apart from the jurisdictions, okay? So the first important article that you need to know is Article 129. This is a good thing to make a note of. It was very useful for me because I studied this for my AOR exam, and this is something in practice that we use extensively, okay? So the first article of the Constitution, the Indian Constitution, I'm referring to the Indian Constitution, 4 articles extensively used in Supreme Court practice on a daily basis. You must know these by heart. Article 129 says that Supreme Court is a court of record, and it has the power to punish for contempt of itself. So it calls the Supreme Court a court of record. Now what does this mean? It means that in the Supreme Court, whatever happens is on affidavits, right? Where does the evidence actually take place? The evidence actually takes place in the lower courts, in the trial courts. But in the Supreme Court, because it's a court of record, you don't need any evidence more than an affidavit or a counter affidavit which you file to prove it. That is evidence enough. And whatever the Supreme Court says becomes a part of the evidence itself. So that's very essential to keep in mind, okay? So you have a court of record, which means it's archived for posterity. You do not need to reprove those things, okay? You don't have to lead evidence. It is automatically ipso facto evidentiary in nature, okay? It's evidence in itself. Also, it's very important to know that Article 141, which is the second article, the second important article of the Constitution. The first one was 129. The second one is 141. Okay, it talks about the law being declared by Supreme Court as binding. So whatever law the Supreme Court declares, whatever judgment, whatever order, whatever the Supreme Court says is binding on all other courts in the territory of India. So that's very, very crucial to understand. A lot of people have been messaging me on other groups saying, has it started or not? So I'm just requesting one of you to put it up on Facebook that we're online. If anybody needs help, just help your friends across, okay? It would otherwise interrupt me to constantly go and help everybody. Yes, so the second article is Article 141, that you actually have the law which is declared by the Supreme Court as binding upon all courts of the country, okay? So that's important, that there is a structural hierarchy in process, okay? So you have an apex court which, if what it says, would become ipso facto binding by virtue of Article 141 on all the other courts in the country, okay? So that's important. Third is Article 144. Article 144 of the Indian Constitution. So I've mentioned 3 important articles and I'm going to mention the 4th one, and these 4 are more than enough to know overview of practice procedure. You don't need to study any book or waste your time reading pages altogether. Apart from the jurisdiction articles that we are going to discuss today, this is what you need to focus on, okay? So 129, 141, 144, okay, is all civil and judicial authorities aid the Supreme Court. Article 144 of the Indian Constitution, all civil and judicial authorities aid the Supreme Court. Now this is interesting because all the other courts have to act in consonance with the Supreme Court. They cannot act distinctly, okay? So this is a sort of again the structural hierarchy being buttressed, okay? Everybody has to work in tandem. We all work as a team. So trial court and all the other high courts have to obey the Supreme Court orders. For instance, in the COVID issue, if Supreme Court says there should be a video conferencing, formulate guidelines, everybody across the country, then that's what we all need to follow. Why? By virtue of Article 144 and 141, because Supreme Court has, one second, because Supreme Court has the power of superintendence over all other courts, and all other courts are bound to cooperate and act in aid of that superintendence, okay? The last article in the big, just a minute. I've been teaching my lectures for 2 hours every day, and I think that's the aftermath of a bad throat. Anyway, Article 142 tells us that there is an inherent jurisdiction in the Supreme Court, okay? So that's the 4th article. 129, 141, 144 and 142. 142 makes it clear that there is an inherent power to do complete justice. Now this is very important because Ayodhya judgment of the Supreme Court has invoked Article 142, which is the inherent powers judgment. So this is interesting because for one of the first times we were not expecting invocation of 142. It's a very sparing exercise. Normally the court doesn't use this, okay? It's like a dustbin article. It's a residuary nature. So 142 has been invoked in the Ramlala judgment, in the Ayodhya judgment, to come out with a unanimous verdict, okay? So very important and interesting development again of 142 is Ayodhya. So these are 4 articles that I've told you that are important to keep in mind. Now I'm jumping on to the jurisdictions with you. So now I'm going to give you an overview quickly of what are the various types of jurisdictions, and this is important to know, okay, in the Supreme Court, what sort of filings can be done. So number 1, very important, is Article 131 of the Indian Constitution. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to make a chart with you today. I'm going to tell you the name of the jurisdiction, then I'm going to tell you the name of the article in the Indian Constitution, okay, the number of the article, where it's found, where you can actually find that jurisdiction, because that will be in the cause title when you file, and I'll also tell you the corresponding Supreme Court rule number. So that will save time because that all has to feature in your filing, and that will tell you that what kind of compliances you need to follow when you actually get a brief. जब कोई भी सुप्रीम कोर्ट का ब्रीफ आएगा तो उसके लिए 3 चीजें बहुत जरूरी है. पहली चीज है आपको जानना है कि मैं क्या फाइल करूंगा, मुझे कौन सा पिटिशन फाइल करना है. सेकंड चीज बहुत जरूरी है कि मैं किस प्रोविजन के अंडर करूंगा, उसके लिए मुझे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का आर्टिकल आना चाहिए. और थर्डली, प्रोविजन टू द एक्सटेंट ऑफ सुप्रीम कोर्ट रूल आना चाहिए कि मैं किस प्रोसीजरल रूल के अंडर फाइल करूंगा. ये 3 चीजें अगर मुझे आ गया तो ये 3 चीजें आर मोर देन इनफ फॉर मी टू नो एनीथिंग एंड एवरीथिंग about the filing compliance, what the AOR has to do, what the listing and when the listing will rather happen, and what's going to happen in the hearing overall, broadly, okay? So that lens is what I'm going to look at when I teach you jurisdictions today, okay? That's the kind of ambit I'm looking at. So the first one is original suits, okay? So the first type of jurisdiction, you can make a note of it if you like, is original suits. Article 131 of the Indian Constitution, original suits, okay? This has to be read with order 25 to 27 of SCR, Supreme Court rules, order 25 to 27. Now whenever there is a dispute between two states, okay, two state governments or a center and a state government, okay, then it becomes very important that we originally go to the Supreme Court first. So the term original suit here is a civil suit which is filed originally before the Supreme Court. Ideally, a civil suit has to be filed as per the CPC, before whom it has to be filed at the court of first instance. So the lowest fora available. So you will go to your district judge or you will go to the High Court depending on the pecuniary jurisdiction. If it's over 2 CR or 1 CR, depending on whether you're in the Delhi High Court or the Bombay High Court. But in a classic case where two central governments or where two state governments, or center and state government are at loggerheads, you directly go to the Indian Constitution and you open Article 131 and you read it with the SCR order 25 to 27. Please remember, no private party can ever file an original suit in the Supreme Court, okay? You have to have a purely constitutional law interpretation, dispute as to the constitutional law interpretation or question as to the constitutional law interpretation, which will go to the Supreme Court, wherein two parties are two governments in place, okay? So you have that entire system of it not being a commercial contract question or it being a private dispute. So if Rajasthan and Haryana have a dispute with respect to carriage of goods simply, then that's a contractual dispute. That's not going to go into an original suit because that's not a dispute related to the constitutional law interpretation or the interpretation of the constitution of the country. So important to understand there is that no private party will come into the picture, okay? So that's a crucial thing. So original suits is that initial bit. Now I'm going to the second type of jurisdiction. Second type of jurisdiction is Article 32, writ jurisdiction. Very popularly used, okay? This is important to know. This is one of the most popular jurisdictions that we use, wherein we are able to file writs before the Supreme Court under Article 32 of the Indian Constitution. Okay, this is for enforcement of our fundamental rights. Now, how is this different from the High Court? High Court Article 226, okay, also allows us to file writs, but Supreme Court has Article 32. First of all, the concept or the scope becomes narrower, okay? It is only fundamental rights. It's just not legal rights or human rights, okay? The concept is narrower because 32 will only protect Part 3, what has been made fundamental in nature. And secondly, it is about the localized action. For instance, I'm telling you the differences between 226 and 32 because often we say that they have concurrent jurisdiction. That means that if there is a fundamental rights violation, we usually say you can go to the Supreme Court or you can go to the High Court. Either is okay. But no, you have to be careful where you go. Why do I say that? The answer is that sometimes when the dispute or the nature of the lis is specific to an area only. For instance, I'm talking about the CA issue, okay? I'm talking about Shaheen Bagh. Now that is specific to Delhi, okay? That's not spread all across India, but there is the CA issue which is specific to, which is not specific, which is generic to all over India. But Shaheen Bagh, whether it should be lifted, it should not be lifted. So in that situation, you can have the Supreme Court initially say, or the JNU riots, you can have the Supreme Court say, go to your High Court concerned first, okay? You exhaust that remedy. So it's a discretion. Even though court has concurrent jurisdiction, but sometimes if the Supreme Court feels that the nature of the lis or the dispute is not such that it's pan-India, it can ask you to go to the High Court concerned if it's a localized nature of the lis. Okay, suppose I'm filing something against teen talaq or polygamy or nikah halala. Now this is all across the country. You have issues in Hyderabad, you have problems like I said in Telangana, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Madhya Pradesh, Haryana. Everywhere you are seeing cases of nikah halala. Delhi also for that matter, UP. You are seeing cases of nikah halala and polygamy walk-in. So here Supreme Court is going to say, okay, I'll take that petition which is challenging the wires of Section 2 of the Shariat Act, that petition challenging the constitutionality or the validity of the wires of Section 2, I'm going to entertain that as a fundamental rights violation, striking out that list. Okay, so this is the difference, because that issue is pan-India. It's affecting almost every state. So Supreme Court can entertain that. Okay, so that's the difference between 32 and 226. So you need to keep that in mind a bit. Okay, sorry. Then the third type of original, so I'm doing types of original jurisdiction right now. The third type of original jurisdiction is transfer. Okay, transfer. So the first one was original suit. The second one was writs. The third is transfer. So any sort of transfer which I'm seeking inter high court, okay, from one state to another, or if I'm seeking a transfer on a matter of constitutional law interpretation, in all such situations, I'm going to invoke the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. Original means I'm going to go first itself to the Supreme Court. So it means that I'm not going to go and exhaust any local remedy in my state court. Okay, nobody is going to ask me to tell me pehle aap high court jao. I'll be allowed to directly come to the Supreme Court. Okay, nobody is going to stop me from doing that. Sorry. So what happens is that you have certain jurisdictions under the heading of transfer. Now the first is Section 25 Civil Procedure Code. Okay, Section 25 CPC. I'm doing the types of transfer jurisdictions that are available. Sorry. Section 25 CPC has to be read with Order 41 SCR. Section 25 CPC has to be read with Order 25 Order 41 SCR. Okay, this is talking about any sort of civil transfer. So all your matrimonial disputes, wherever transfers are sought, they are sought under Section 25. Okay, so you have one transfer there. Then you have another type of transfer wherein any criminal matter has to be transferred, say for instance from the state of Rajasthan to the state of, say for instance, Haryana. If you feel that, or when Kathua happened, they wanted the trial to go out of the state of J&K, okay, for which Indira Jaising argued before the Supreme Court. So they had actually sought a transfer. I think it has resumed back. There's a glitch, I think, technically. Anyway, so sometimes you can seek transfer, and that transfer inter se has to be done to show that this particular trial will be prejudiced in another country. So you have different types of civil and criminal provisions. Okay, criminal you will get from Criminal Procedure Code Section 406, and civil you will get from the Civil Procedure Code. Okay, so that's your transfer, and all of this has to be read with the Constitution, Article 139A. Okay, Article 139A, that's the third type. That's when the constitutional law question comes in. So when Babri Masjid case is transferred out of the courts in UP and pulled out to Supreme Court, okay, in the backdrop of what was happening with Ismail Faruqi, that's very interesting to see. That entire verdict, okay, tells us how a question related to the constitutional interpretation can actually be pulled out. Okay, so Article 139A of the Indian Constitution. Okay, I'm not going into too much of detail because we can go on and on. So I'm just giving you an overview, and then, you know, probably we can do another session on each jurisdiction later, because it's a lot of discussion. I usually, when I teach this subject over a spread of 3 or 4 months. Okay, so I'm just trying to tell you that all this exists so that it doesn't seem alien. Okay, so remember, if you're seeking a transfer of a case from Kerala to Haryana, then you have to go to the Supreme Court directly. Okay, you are seeking an interstate transfer, okay, between two high courts of two different states. So all of this is original jurisdiction. Now there are two other places where the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction. Okay, one place is presidential elections. So there's something called election petition. Okay, it actually is governed by a special law, a lex specialis, which is called the Presidential and Vice Presidential Elections Act 1970, or rather 52, I think was the act first, 1952. And this is read with Article 71 and Order 46, okay? Article 71 of the Constitution and Order 46 of SCR. You don't need to know the order numbers, but I'm still giving you the details if someone wants to note down. And this actually says that if there's any dispute with respect to the presidential or vice presidential elections, then all of that will be dealt with originally by the Supreme Court, okay? Simple, nothing complex. And the last type of original jurisdiction is whenever there's an arbitral appointment, an arbitrator appointment which has to be done under section 11 subclause 5, okay, by the CJI, okay, in an international commercial arbitration, in an ICA, then that arbitral appointment read with the CJI scheme, this arbitrator appointment in an international commercial arbitration would be done by the CJI, and that's also an original dispute. That's an original jurisdiction to be invoked. So in these four umbrella categories, I've sort of told you that in all these situations, irrespective of who's getting the brief to you, you will as a lawyer have to file directly to the Supreme Court, okay? Which is why it's very important to know what the original jurisdiction is, okay? So the moment a case will come to you, it's like a checklist, okay? It's like a tick box. Quickly go and see if it's an original suit, if it's a fundamental right violation, it could be a writ. If it's a transfer case, then you could go under the original jurisdiction if you're going interstate between two states. And if it's an arbitral appointment, check if it's to be done by the CJI under the ICA section 11 of the Arbitration Act, okay, or if it's a presidential election dispute. So it's like a checklist. The moment you get your papers or your brief as a lawyer, you must first go and see, is it fitting in the original jurisdiction? Is it fitting in the appellate jurisdiction? Okay, so that's why I'm teaching you like this, so that it becomes very easy when the papers or the brief walks into you or someone asks you, where will this dispute go? So you need to know the fora. So in all such situations, which I've told you until now, writs, original suits, transfer, presidential election and arbitral appointment, your first court to go to is the Supreme Court of India. It enjoys original jurisdiction. Now I'm quickly jumping on to appellate jurisdiction. Again, very extensively used. तो दो तीन चीजें बहुत ज़्यादा यूज होती हैं. Writs बहुत ज़्यादा यूज होती हैं, ठीक है, which is the original jurisdiction under 32. SLPs बहुत ज़्यादा यूज होती हैं. We are going to do SLPs now. That's under the appeal side. So appeal is used a lot. SLP under Article 136 बहुत यूज होती है. And thirdly, what's most extensively and almost across the board also used is any sort of inherent or plenary jurisdiction. We're just going to go to that in a second, because last year was the year of curatives. It was the year of reviews. We saw so much with, and this year also, we saw so much with Nirbhaya. We saw so much with Rafale. We saw so much with Sabarimala. We saw so much with triple talaq, okay? So last year and this year was interspaced with so much action with respect to curative and review petitions. It was a beautiful time to be in a Supreme Court practice, okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do the appellate jurisdiction with you. I've done original. Now when a brief walks into you, you need to check क्या इसमें lower court का record है. Is there a TCR? If there is a lower court record, if there is some sort of trial proceedings that has happened beneath, you must understand that you are in the realm of appeal, okay? You're on the appeal side. You're not on the original side anymore, okay? You're not on the original side. Now, when you're in the appellate zone, it's very simple. First, you need to identify whether it's going to be a civil appeal, a criminal appeal, or a statutory appeal. You can make a note of this. These are the three kinds of appeals that are filed in the Supreme Court. Also, this question which I'm doing with you like this is very important, because usually this is a pet AOR exam question. Discuss the different kinds of jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, okay? So this is like a pet expected brownie question in the AOR exams also. So we are literally asked this question from this canvas. So you have to pretty much know all of this, okay? So the second kind of jurisdiction is the appellate side, okay? So you can have three kinds of appeals: civil appeal, criminal appeal, and statutory appeal. I'll just explain to you. Statutory, S-T-A-T-U-T-O-R-Y, okay? Now civil appeal. Civil appeal is actually coming under Article 132 to 134A rather of your Indian Constitution, okay? So these are civil appeals. किसी भी civil matter में जो नीचे से एक आपकी RFA होते हुए, रेगुलर फर्स्ट अपील होते हुए, ऊपर सुप्रीम कोर्ट आ रहा है डिस्ट्रिक्ट जज से होते हुए. सो व्हेन यू स्टडी ट्रायल, यू आर गोइंग टू लुक एट ऑल दीज लिम्स beneath, which is why it's excellent to jump into the Supreme Court after you've done trial at length, because the appellate side will become so clear to you, and because you would have done a little bit of writs in the High Court, the original side from 32 perspective would become very clear to you. So all you need to know is literally like 3 articles more. Literally, it's that simple. Which is why I always say you must reach the Supreme Court after doing trial, and I'm including trial to mean trial courts and the High Court here, okay? So you need to look at this base so that it helps you cake up to what we call the Supreme Court practice, which is literally nothing but a mixture or an amalgamation of all of this. I really feel it becomes super easy as a lawyer. Especially I felt this difference because I had a lot of colleagues who started right from the Supreme Court. Like their day one was Supreme Court practice assisting an AOR. But I think it's the best thing to actually run through trial, because when you know the lower court practice very well, right from the lower fora up until the High Court, appellate side becomes excruciatingly clear to you, crystal clear, and you breeze through because maximum filings are SLPs, okay? So it's a breeze, literally it's a breeze. So civil appeals come there. Criminal appeals, on the other hand, talk about there is a enlargement of Criminal Appellate Jurisdiction Act 1970. Okay, so you can write that down. There's section 2 of Enlargement of Criminal Jurisdiction Act, which essentially deals with criminal appeals, because now we do not need a certificate of fitness. Okay, so a lot of this appellate structure had come into play earlier where we needed a certificate of fitness. Now we don't need it. Okay, so we can directly file a criminal appeal. Supreme Court has made practice a lot easier in terms of the ease of a person to reach the Supreme Court. Okay, and the third I told you is a statutory appeal. Statutory appeal means that there are some acts, there are some statutes which by their very nature of provisions have prescribed an appellate provision within themselves. Okay, for instance, you have the Consumer Protection Act, you have the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. So anything from the NCDRC will directly go to the Supreme Court as an appeal in a statute format by virtue of that statute, and it will be called the statutory appeal. So you don't need any other thing. You just need that lex specialis, and you need a certified copy of the impugned order coming from your NCLAT or coming from your NCDRC, the National Commission for Dispute Redressal, or probably which is looking at consumer protection, or probably an NCLAT, okay, a National Company Law Appellate Tribunal. So this is on the appellate side. So the next tick when you get a set of papers is, if you've ruled out original jurisdiction, look at your brief. Now see, does it fit into anywhere of the appellate side that I've told you? Does it fit into civil criminal appeal? Is there a lex specialis? Is there a statute which is involved? If there's the Environmental Protection Act, if there's a Consumer Protection Act brief, if there's a CAT brief, you need to check all of this because they have their own. Is it an Army Tribunal brief? They have their own lex specialis, which is not going to be a general civil or a general criminal appeal as per the articles of the Indian Constitution. Okay, it's not going to be these. It's not going to be a civil or a criminal appeal. That's going to be a statutory appeal. So that's your second checklist. You need to check the nature of the law that's involved in the list. Okay, that's what you need to check. The last is in appellate jurisdiction, SLP, Article 136, extensively invoked. Now the only little catch to know in SLP is that you can go from any order, okay, from any order. This is very widely used. When we go to the Supreme Court, judges literally throw the brief saying dismissed, dismissed, dismissed. That's actually the SLP filings precisely, okay, because SLPs are allowed to be filed from any court or tribunal in the country against any order. So even against a magistrate's order, I can file an SLP. So usually a lot of frivolous filings go into SLP. So please remember, it's important to exhaust your alternative remedy before you actually advise a client to file an SLP. Please don't just eyes shut blindly tell a client that go file an SLP. That's why there are so many dismissals, because there are so many frivolous filings. This was a tool, a special leave petition under Article 136 was a tool which was specially crafted so that we could come out with an exceptional case that against any order, even from the magistrate's order, even from the district magistrate's order, from the district judge's order, I can directly jump up to the Supreme Court. I don't have to go through the appellate structure of the High Court. If I feel that there has been a complete violation of justice or a gross violation of justice, that's the criteria in the wisdom of the judges. That's the criteria to filing an SLP. So SLP is important. Please don't have your AOR or anybody advise you randomly to file an SLP. Okay, it's going to get dismissed. If there is an alternative remedy that exists, first exercise that. It's like the writ, okay? There is no other alternative remedy, okay? So usually in SLP, obviously there will be an alternate remedy. But if that alternate remedy is also plagued, you're not able to get justice there, and it is a question which involves a lot of people. For instance, these builder disputes have been coming in, okay? So suppose there are so many people like JP Builders and so many people who've been cheated to the tunes of lakhs of crores of rupees. In that situation, Supreme Court could exercise its power under Article 136 and 142. So that inherent power to do complete justice, read with the SLP article, to take this up as an exceptional case that we are going to now, as the Supreme Court, we are going to monitor this case and we are going to look at it. So Unitech Builders, JP Builders, some of them are bail applications which are filed by the builders, and some of them are SLPs which have been taken up. Okay, so very, very interesting. Do not have another advocate fool you into filing an SLP at any stage. Be very careful, because it's going to get dismissed. Okay, you have the provision of an SLP, but it's a special provision. It's a special leave that you seek of the court. You wouldn't get the leave. Okay, it wouldn't be admitted also. Right. Now I'm moving to the third type of jurisdiction, guys. I'm moving to advisory. Okay, so the third, I've done original with you, I've done appellate with you. Now if a brief comes to you, now you need to check whether it's falling under the ambit of advisory jurisdiction. This is technically not something which in practice as lawyers we get much, but I'm just telling you it exists. So there's a presidential reference wherein the president can ask the Supreme Court for its views. Okay, for instance, it had done so in the Babri Masjid case. It had done so in the 2G spectrum case. Okay, Supreme Court may or may not give that view. So there's a shall and non-binding clause, and that's your Article 143 of the Indian Constitution. I'm not going deeper into this because it's not something which we as lawyers use too much. Okay. Now the last bit that I want to discuss with you today is, I wanted to do bench strength, but I think we are running short of time. I've kind of exhausted over 30 minutes. So I'll end up with this particular inherent and plenary jurisdiction and then take up questions if you have any. So remember this, that first of all, it's important to know that Article 142, okay, is one of the inherent jurisdiction clauses. Okay, Article 142 is one of the inherent jurisdiction clauses. One second, guys. Yeah, okay, so that was a glitch again. Okay, so yes, so Article 142 is one of the inherent jurisdiction clauses, after which we have the exceptional two jurisdictions which I want to tell you about. One is called review and one is called curative. Okay, so one is called review and one is called curative. So review is when the court looks at its own decision again. So it's like a glance to have a look at it again. Okay, so review is that fora which is open to us as per Article 137 of the Constitution. So if there has been some error apparent on the face of record, okay, you can file a review. Okay, under this is more on the criminal side. If there's a discovery of a new fact, okay, then you can go on the civil side. Okay, if there's some fraud, if there's some principle of natural justice violation, so there are grounds for filing the review, and Article 137 has to be read with Order 47 of the SCR. Okay, what's crucial is a review goes to the same bench which passed the original judgment as far as possible. So that's interesting. A review is heard by circulation first. It's circulated to the same bench. Okay, the same bench which passed the judgment. So usually if there's no error, okay, in the judgment, will a bench which has passed the judgment ever go against its views? No, it wouldn't. Okay, so that's an interesting catch. So review is one very important jurisdiction type to know. So remember this also. Check whenever a brief as a lawyer comes to you. Check if you're out of the original jurisdiction I've taught you. If you're out of the appellate jurisdiction also, then come down to seeing if there is already a Supreme Court judgment in place. Okay, that's when you need to go down to asking if there is a review that I can now file. Okay, so Ayodhya had a review, Rafale had a review, Sabarimala had a review. In all these situations, we formulate grounds of review so that the court relooks at its own sentence or order or judgment again. Okay, so very, very crucial there. The last resort, that's very interesting, and I think I will try and sort of do another webinar with you probably on this, is one of my favorite topics. It's called the curative jurisdiction. Okay, this has come into picture with Nirbhaya striking in, and I think this is an excellent topic of discussion, but I'm just going to tell you cursorily what it is. So after your review is also dismissed, you have another fencing. So it's like this. Okay, you have a Supreme Court judgment. सुप्रीम कोर्ट जजमेंट डिसमिस हो गई, मेरे अगेंस्ट गई, तो मैंने रिव्यू फाइल किया, रिव्यू भी मेरे अगेंस्ट गया, तो मैंने क्यूरेटिव फाइल किया. दैट्स द थर्ड ऑप्शन आई हैव एज अ लॉयर टू नाउ फाइल. आई कैन फाइल अ क्यूरेटिव आफ्टर द डिसमिसल ऑफ माई रिव्यू. And under what provision can I file the curative? Curative is an innovative legal tool which has been curated by the Rupa Ashok Hurra judgment. Okay, so you have the judgment of Rupa Hurra and Ashok Hurra, and this has created or crafted the Supreme Court's curative jurisdiction, which we now use today, and it's enshrined in Article 48 of the, or rather Order 48, sorry, of the Supreme Court rules. Okay, so that's important to know. So there is a last check. So this is again an inherent jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, which it enjoys after you exhaust the appellate side. Okay. Apart from all of this, there is a contempt jurisdiction. Just make a note of this. You just need to know that this flows from Article 129, which I told you earlier. So there's a civil and a criminal contempt here. Okay, so if there's any advocate who does a contempt, commits a contempt, a civil or a criminal contempt, then in that situation, or any person otherwise, then in that situation, Supreme Court under Article 129 of the Indian Constitution has the power to punish for contempt. Okay. So this was me telling you essentially the kinds of jurisdictions. I also can talk to you a little about bench strength if we have time and all of you would like to listen, or we can probably do that on another day. I'm just going to try and see how I can take the comments if there's any questions, etc. So I'm just going to try and figure that out. Yeah. 1 second. If one of you can just tell me if you'd like to continue, and or probably we can resume this and probably do it on another day with respect to bench strength, because I think there's an attention span of part 40 that we have. I'm just going to try and see if we can look at questions. I'm not able to see the chat bubbles there. Yeah, 1 second. Wait. Okay, I'm just scared that I may not end the session, and that would disrupt it. But in any case, I think this is what I had to sort of talk to you about jurisdictions. We can quickly do another session on Q&As. We can do one on bench strength, which I'd prepared for today, but due to paucity of time, I haven't touched upon it. So I'd be happy to do that with you, and probably also take... Okay, someone just asked me about criminal appeals to be explained again. Sanjay Ji. Okay, so criminal appeals are actually very interesting. Initially, what used to happen was wherever there was an appeal on the criminal side, then you needed something called a certificate of fitness. Okay, a certificate of fitness, which we also require on the civil side now, but we've done away with on the criminal side completely, was that the High Court, after dismissing the appeal, so remember in a criminal appeal, what will happen? It will first go to the MM, or it will go to the sessions if it's a sessions trial. So you will have MM or sessions adjudicate upon it first and give a judgment. Then you will have either the prosecution or the accused or the complainant. Victims now have a provision to appeal. Either of them under the CRPC go to the High Court. So there will be a second structure there. So you will have your first appeal coming there. Then you will have someone either from the High Court side, whoever, if it's the accused or the prosecution, whoever wants to go up to the Supreme Court. So then you will have from the High Court someone going to the Supreme Court. Now, if you want to go in a criminal appeal from the High Court to the Supreme Court, initially you needed a certificate of fitness. That means you needed under 134, the High Court to certify that yes, this is a fit case for appeal. Only once the High Court certifies that. So even after dismissing your appeal, High Court has to give you a certificate to say, okay, I still allow you to go to the Supreme Court to file the appeal. Now you have to wait for that certificate to come, etc. Now this was becoming cumbersome because people were housed in jails. We had under trials, we have prisoners, we had convicts. Okay, we had these people who were languishing in jails, and this was becoming a problematic issue. Even limitation was becoming an issue. So what they actually said was, do away with the requirement of the Article 134 certificate of fitness. They said we don't need this. You directly go to the Supreme Court, and for that they created a special statute. They created a lex specialis called Enlargement of Criminal Appellate Jurisdiction Act 1970. Okay, that has section 2, which allows now the Supreme Court to directly entertain each and every criminal appeal. Okay, now you don't need to wait as a lawyer for that certificate of fitness. You can directly go up to the Supreme Court on the criminal side once the High Court dismisses your appeal. You don't have to wait for anything. Okay, you don't have to wait for a certificate of permission of the High Court per se. Okay, so that's the distinction. Okay, yes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to also talk to Sir, Tarveen Sir, or someone, one of the admins, and I'm going to probably get one on the bench strength and a Q&A session, and probably get back to this. And thank you so much for lending a listening ear. I don't think I want to stretch beyond 45 minutes because there's a certain attention span. I teach extensively, so I know my kids get tired after 40-45 minutes. But it's been a delight, and I'm sure I've seen so many of you in court. Thank you so much. We had so many people joining in. And I'm sure I'm going to do another one soon, hopefully related to the quorum, the bench strength. And then we can discuss about how we have 2 judges somewhere, 3 somewhere, 5 somewhere, which is also a question in the AOR exams, which is asked a lot, by the way. Okay, in some format or the other, in practice and procedure. Okay, so it's been a delight talking to all of you. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to more such lectures. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Bye-bye. Have a great evening and enjoy your weekend now, and stay home. Stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye. See you. Thank you so much.